Conversating? Conversating with Pops and Ade.
Yep, conversating with PopsnAde.
Well, I'm Peter J. Harris.
And I'm Adenike A. Harris, and this is Conversating with PopsnAde.
Conversating with Pops and Ade.
Let's go.
Let's get started.
Hey, everybody. Oh, man. Welcome back to Conversating with PopsnAde.
Yes,
I am
welcome back.
one of the hosts, Adenike A. Harris, and of course, y'all know my dad, also known as Pops. And what's your name again? I forget about
Peter J. Harris. Peter J. Harris. That's the J for my mother, June, who used to say that when she got mad at me. That's right, when I knew I had to do what she asked me.
I definitely have to respect my grandmother. And that's also, I think all parents do that. When you guys yell and say my first middle name, I know I'm in trouble.
That's right.
Anyway, so today I am so excited and honored to bring on this guest with us that she's going to share space with us. Her name is Aishah Shahidah Simmons. She is an award-winning Black feminist lesbian cultural worker who for over 25 years has examined the intersections of race, gender, sexuality, and sexual violence. Like, as you know, I'm in women's studies, so when I first heard of her, I was like, oh, I have to know her. She's the producer, director of the Ford Foundation-funded 2006 release film, No, the Rape documentary, and the editor of the 2020 Lambda Literary Award-winning anthology, Love with Accountability, Digging Up the Roots of Child Sexual Abuse. I am so honored to not only just call her sister friend, sister survivor friend, but just friend, colleague. I had the pleasure of using her documentary in my master's thesis, and enough about it. Let's just bring her on and just get this conversation started. So please welcome Aishah Shahidah Simmons. Are you there with us? Hi. Hey. Oh my God. I'm so excited to see not only your beautiful face, but just to be in space with you. And I'm so happy that you're here with us. Thank you for joining us on Conversating.
Thank you. And I envision one day when the three of us will be in the same space, because I've been with each one of you one-to-one. And so I'm really happy to share this virtual space. And one of these days, we're going to all be together in person.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I didn't realize that. We've never all three been in the same space. Yeah. That's
but I feel like I'm always in communication with the three of you, though it's been one-to-one when we've been together in person.
Yeah, it has. It has. And I just appreciate, the last physical time outside of our own personal stuff, but like in connection with our work was when you had the conference in, what was that, 2019? So it's been a while. Yes, it's been a while. So, well, I want to jump into it. I really just want everyone to know the reason why we wanted you as our guest is because we have long respected and loved your turn of phrase, love with accountability. And, I actually want to I'm going to pivot this and let Pops bring in the big question so that we can get started, because I love the way that he asks this and he talks about this turn of phrase. So Pops, go ahead. I'm going to bring you in on here. Go ahead and ask what you want to ask and say what you want to say.
Well, let's keep it simple. So Aishah, what is love with accountability as a program, as an initiative, an actual community engagement program? And what is it as a concept, as something that you can start absorbing into your life and using as a way of acting in your deeper, relationships with folks? How about that?
Ooh, all right.
I told you he was going to do it.
Somehow I feel like it's a deep. Yeah, it is deep. So let me just do a little show and tell. So Love with Accountability as the anthology, which is so happy, pleased, grateful that you two are one or two of the 40 contributors. This project. So in many ways, I'm starting with the end to talk about the beginning, right? It's like a Sankofa experience. So this project emerges from my own lived experiences, right? So as a childhood sexual abuse survivor, and who told my parents when I was 10 about what about my grandfather abusing me, and they didn't remove me from the situation. My parents were and still are human rights activists, and my grandparents provided the quote unquote safe home while they were out. They're divorced and have been, but while they were out transforming and changing the world. And so I always had been focused on the harm that my grandfather caused, but hadn't tapped into my parents' role. In 2015, while really things coming to a head with my really pushing my parents. This was after saving my grandfather's life. He is now an ancestor, but in 2010, I played a role in saving his life with medical personnel. And then after that, I was just like, I can't do this anymore. And so it was really coming out of a meditative process. I'm a long-term meditation practitioner. I've been sitting, meditating since 2002. And in my sheer anguish, because my parents at the time were not able to deal with it, I was just sitting and literally, I mean, it's one of those kind of like things that just kind of came up, was love with accountability, because often love can be used, particularly when we're talking about sexual violence within the family, almost as an inadvertent weapon. I don't think it's an intentional one, but it's like, I love you, I wouldn't harm you, or if you loved me, you wouldn't keep pushing. And so what came up for me was like, yes, I love you. And yes, I believe and know that you all love me, but that love will not shield any of us from accountability.
Absolutely.
So that's where it comes from, and somehow accountability has been associated with harm, punishment. And I'm really wanting to connect these two, that accountability is radical love, and radical love is accountability.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, for me, the concept. I mean, I would have never phrased it the way you did, Brother Peter, but that is the concept. And so for me, with the anthology, well, first with the online project that then transformed into the anthology, it was a forum on the 10 days of writings by survivors and advocates, and my mother as a bystander. My mother is not a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, but she is a survivor of sexual trauma. Really talking about, in the context of the survivors, featured survivors, talking about the harm that we've all experienced, but then envisioning how can we transform that harm? How can we how can we move and encourage others to not only be survivor centered as we're disrupting this pandemic, but then how can we envision a world where we don't have it anymore? And so that was the invitation for the forum that then transformed into the anthology. And so I just want to say what I really appreciated about you all's contribution was, I mean, Adenike, you share about being a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, not at the hands of your father. And then you all talk about father-daughter relationship in terms of this path of healing. And so often we don't get to hear about those healing journeys. We definitely don't hear it often enough from between fathers and daughters. So often, so many conversations about how sons need fathers. And speaking as a daddy's girl, I know how important my father has been, even in the midst of these painful contradictions of not being protected as a child by my grandfather, from my grandfather.
Yeah. Man, that's why I loved being a part of it as well, because you created a space where you could give a different perspective on what accountability looks like. And that's what drew me to you, to your work, and particularly this project. And then also, as my dad and I talk about it, like, I realized, not knowing the turn of phrase because it was something that I wasn't aware of, but it's something that he and I began to do, right? Like, we were living embodiments of love with accountability, because even though he was not at all my perpetrator and abuser, I still had questions about what I felt was an absence in my youth, and what I felt was him not being around. So I ended up doing the pushing. I was asking those questions, and we had that deep conversation. And I was holding him accountable in a way with love about what I was missing and what I needed. So this concept was something that, you know, I think Pops and I began doing before I even knew that you, Aishah, would be so integral into our own healing journey and our lives. And yeah, it's a powerful concept, movement, action, because I do believe it's like, it's an action. It's love with that, with is the action, you know? So yeah.
And I want to say what's so powerful is like for you all, what may be or at least historically, because I met you all in 2016. So there's 26, and we're now in 2021. But what I think is very powerful was how I came to know about you all's existence was through my dear sister friend and Peter's sister friend, Jocelyn Luckett, who's now Dr. Jocelyn Luckett. When she knew about the work, she was like, you have got to talk to my friend Peter and his daughter Adenike and the incredible work that they're doing. So while you all are doing your one-to-one private father-daughter healing, it is reverberating, because here you all at the time we're in California, I'm in Philly with Jocelyn, and I'm like, okay, oh my God, connect me with these two. You know, just the power of that. And then thinking about how both Peter and I at completely different time periods were both mentored by Toni K. Bambara, the writer. So it's just how it's all cyclical and powerful.
Absolutely. I think about that too when I was in grad school and I came across an annotation of the No documentary, and I was like, I need to get this. And I made sure that I got a copy so that I could use it in my thesis. So again, it's like, in the midst of the work Dad and I are doing, me doing my own work and my own master's thesis, like, you are a through line, and you talk about that reverberation, and then now how it just comes together full circle. It's actually been the most exciting thing, like for me, because like I shared with you a couple of weeks ago, I find so much joy in meeting people who are doing work that I admire and that I'm interested in. So when I finally got to meet you, it was like I met a movie star in a sense, because I was like, girl, your film was this and your work now. And I mean, I remember telling my dad, I was like, Jocelyn knows her. Like, I was so in awe of that, you know? So yeah, it's talk about synergies. Absolutely.
Well, you know, I should think about what Toni says in Salt Eaters, you know, sweetheart, you sure you want to be well? I mean, if you want to be well, then and in that scene, the sister has just come out of trying to kill herself. And the healer is asking her, well, you know, don't waste my time, because I'm here to heal. But I'm telling you, healing is serious work. And that's an accountability to yourself starting, you know, from jump is, are you going to be accountable to the breath you get? You know what I mean? Even though in the case of the Salt Eaters, she was trying to take her breath. She didn't kill herself. Of course, the book goes on. It's a complicated and complex book. You know, that book is really, really, really not for the faint of heart. You know, Toni doesn't play, although you would think you was talking to your big sister, her narrative skills were so seamless. But so that's why I say, when I called you that day a minute ago, and I said, you know what? Love with accountability is cold haiku. I mean, it's 3 words, but it just is essence. It's a distillation of so much of everything, all of the ingredients that have to get down in terms of coming out of your body, out of your mind, out of your spirit, whatever these are for you. If you say you love somebody and you ain't accountable, can you really say you love somebody? Nope. You know, if you say you're accountable, you know what I mean, but you don't want to talk to somebody you say you love, can you really say you're accountable? Nope. You know what I mean? That, besides what Ade said about the with, to me as a poet, and to me as a language worker, you know, when you say love with accountability, and you capitalize with too, you old school, you went 60s poetry. You know, Sonia and them used to throw them big ass, you know, Don L. Lee, they'd be shouting on the page. But seriously, I'm not, we laugh and joke, but we do not play. Love with accountability is a marvelous, like bedrock, in my opinion, which is why it's so inspiring to me, and it just sort of keeps revealing itself. It's like a incense when I'm thinking, when I have deep conversations, not only with my daughter, but with my son, about certain other kinds of angles that we take, with colleagues and friends. I've had debates with folks recently about one thing or another. And I'm also working very hard right now on trying to find language for tenderness, even in dispute. And I'm telling you, sis, love with accountability is a major tool for me now. A major tool. And that's what I mean. So it's a community engagement thing. You know what I mean? In other words, it's you get your grants, you get to execute the anthology, you get those kinds of things. But then you get this wonderful gift of language that's a beautiful, pulsating, profound thing that if you get in crisis, you can say, whoa, am I acting with accountability right now? Am I loving with accountability? That's what I love so much about it. And that's what I mean by the conceptual part of it for me. I wonder if that moves you to jump back in here.
It does move me. And I also, for me, love with accountability comes in its focused, or has been focused around childhood sexual abuse, and which I believe it is the foundation and frontier to most forms of violence. So, and and for me, love can be a double entendre. Like, love can be definitely like that deep love in terms of that we have with family, that we have with our romantic partners. There's that love. But then I think that there's love and accountability is a concept that can be applied outside of family, outside of those one-to-one, or, close, blood, kinship, romantic. Like, because I also think about love in the agape form. Like, what does it mean in terms of to love with accountability in society, in terms of how do we create or co-create society without violence? And again, not losing sight, because so often we can always get into the macro and forget about the survivors and forget about the children or the women or men or gender non-binary people, just humans, period, who are being harmed by sexual violence. So it is not to shift from that, but it's also to be like that. This isn't just about within the family of origin or within even the chosen family, but it is just, I don't even have to know you to have love in terms of just for your existence on the planet and being committed to not wanting to see you harmed as much as I don't want to be harmed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's also one of the things that I always have been saying, even in this podcast and this work that I do with Dad. Yes, our work is focused on the healing that we went through as a survivor of childhood sexual abuse and what happened in our family. But I do also always want people to understand concept of healing and working through, and love with accountability is universal. It isn't just specific. So I am in complete agreement and an understanding. Like, it's not to take away from this foundation of childhood sexual abuse needs to end, and this is the foundation, but also recognize that these concepts of humanity, of not harming someone else, is a lot bigger than just in violent circles. It's also just how we treat each other. It's really about like this: be a good human being. Really recognize a human is like, be a good human being. Like that can be the power of the work that we're doing, that you're doing, Aishah. And I get so warm inside and so excited because I do love how you have dove so deep into ending childhood sexual abuse and really putting the light in all the dark spaces in a way, right? Like, you're like, I'm going to illuminate this because I recognize when it starts here, it trickles into so many other areas of life and of humanity. And if we're not identifying this pain that is being caused to children, it causes even more damage down the line. So let's start at this root. It's like you said, the book is digging up the roots, right? Is you got to dig it up so that we can heal it, so that we can clean out those wounds and not allow things to fester. And I realize a lot of the times and Dad, I think I've said this to you, and if I haven't, then good, it's a new topic. But I always think about sometimes a lot of people don't want to talk to me or talk about what I do, because they're like, oh, well, that was you. That's not me or my family, even though we all know the statistics and we all know the likelihood that it is your family or even possibly you, but you've suppressed it in a way. And so I'm just really honored to hear you say, this is the root, and this love with accountability can also be applied to just the humanity of all of us being good human beings to one another. And it's just really, it's an honor, and thank you.
Yeah. And it's hard. I don't want to act like it's an easy, that's the other thing, that it is hard. And it is hard. And I am one who does not tell, I don't believe in telling people who've been harmed how they should respond, right? Like, so for me, I think it's all about people having options. And so for me, that these are options, but I never, particularly when someone is in the height of their rage or pain, be like, well, you got to forgive, or you got to do this. No. Because I think that that's just another form of harm in the name of maybe good intentions at heart, but that's not what happens. But I think that that's the other thing, that for me, it's like, it's a praxis, it's a practice. It is not, you don't just get here. It's hard work. It's
absolutely
hard
continuous
work.
Hard continuous work. Absolutely.
Exactly. And it's like layer upon layer upon layer. I mean, we all have been in this for a long time. And for me, I'm still peeling back layers. And it's like 27 years in. I'm like, oh my God, it just keeps going. Yeah.
I'm right. Yeah, absolutely.
Also, it's different the work takes place from different angles too. So as a person who, Ade calls a non-abusive loved one, so once me and her got that agreement in place where I was going to walk with her, and really shoulder to shoulder with her and eye to eye with her, I still had, from the angle of a dude raised in this country, raised in Southeast DC, I had to make sure that I didn't backslide, because I wanted to be the absolute, crap out of this smug. I wanted to find all the crackheads who I, used to know. Not when I was a crackhead, but I knew people. I'm not a gangster, but I'm a degree or two away from some. And so what I love about Love with Accountability is there's a persistence too that you have to be about, because if you think that you're just going to make a decision and then paral, you don't have no more work to do. You crazy. And that's what I also love about your this beautiful haiku, is that it allows for a sort of a North Star in your life. Because when you do slip, you say, what I'm feeling right here ain't no accountability. What should I do? Maybe I need to check in with the person who I'm allied with, or, as I like to say, I have great men in my life. I've been very fortunate to have really good, ethical brothers from my, I'll just start with college on out, because that's where some of the sort of clicking in occurred, where I was studying and playing ball, and I was on a major campus like Howard, and I was meeting people from all over the world. And then when the brother, who is now still my buddy, all these years later, when we start standing out in the outfield, and instead of practicing baseball, we were just out there talking life, But now I know that I can go back to him And I went to him and others. We have our mutual friend, Dr. Thomas A. Gordon. Thomas shepherded me through a lot of what we're talking about, and other people. So I think that Love with Accountability gives you this kind of pulsating North Star that you can look to in the midst of the difficulty. And I love that you say that, Aishah, because so often and I'm going to be a little harsh for a second here, so much in the namaste community, you know what I mean? It's like, all you got to do is say namaste and make your voice sound like, you a librarian shushing people. And I'm told you I'm going to be harsh just before beat, bear with me, because I'm not illuminated, you know what I'm saying? But I'm saying, the point I'm trying to make is, that is not a magic wand. Your tone of voice, the fact that you studied books, the fact that you have meditated and all of that stuff, in and of itself, they are just tools. Because as Tony said in the beginning, if you don't want to be well, you can't even get to the point where you acknowledge how hard this shit is. This stuff is hard. When somebody violates your trust, your body, the concept of family, the concept of safety, that's we're all thoughtful folks here. So to me, there's the thing itself, and then there's like the reverberations of the thing, the concepts. So you need to equal and opposite with concepts that are just as elastic and just as supple, so that you can, you need a spell, that you can cast that keeps you lush in your humanity and your love for life. Anyway, so I just, I get hyped too, but like I say, I'm not, this is not that's my kid right there. You know what I mean? Like I said in our TED Talk, I shook the dude's hand who hurt my kid. You know what I mean? I dapped this brother. You know what I mean? That's why I also don't play. Yes, the white man. Yes, white supremacy. Yes, all of that. But you know what I mean? The dude who hurt my kid was a dude who was literally like black, dark skin, who had all the credentials, who was masquerading, like Wesley Snipes or somebody. He was so smooth. And we know, of course, he was really a master predator. And I had to really embrace his fullness as even a human piece of shit in order to really make sure I was there for her. And of course, we're 3,000 miles away. I'm pointing. I don't know where this camera's having me short, but I get into this, and I say that when you are really a devotee of Love with Accountability, then you can get into it, because once you start following that North Star, that's the only way you end up healing in some form or fashion. That's the only way you get to integrate into a whole life, even the ugliest stuff. Because in the end, you gotta integrate if you want to stay alive on this planet Earth and keep serving and keep surviving and keep thriving. So thank you for letting me get hyped. I get hyped. And I appreciate it so much.
I want to jump in, because I think one of the things that I reflect on a lot. It was he's my step grandfather, but the only grandfather that I knew on my paternal side. And he brought me home from the hospital, and molested me when I was a child. And then the same man, many years later, when he was retiring from work, he and my grandmother were going to move to a warmer climate because she had bone cancer. And, Philly, I'm from Philly, and Philly's just cold in the winters. She developed Alzheimer's, and then he took care of her for 10 years around the clock. Because of him, she didn't have to go into a nursing home, hospital, anything. And so, we're holding with this man who was my terrorist, right? My at night, and then this man who was my grandmother's savior, the family savior, and I say that in terms of that those complexities around love with accountability, because we live in a world where it's like it's good and bad, or bad. It's not, we don't know how to deal with the shades of gray. And definitely as marginalized and disenfranchised people who since 1619 have been under the boot of white supremacy, we are trained to be like the outsider coming in, the white man, and Lord knows it's bad. Right. And, you know, scared to be driving. And so, you know, there's so much fear, heightened fear now around just being murdered for just being alive. Right. And so that's real. And also I stay on that and focus on that, because that's not family. That's the outsider. That's the enemy, right? Who brought our people here and changed on and on for generations. But when we want to talk, but then when we bring it in beyond the outsider, we don't know what to do. And I think that again is where that love with accountability comes in. And I think that we don't, and as a result of that, we can't even hold the complexity. So I don't want to, in my particular instance, because of the connection, and a lot of therapy, meditation work, let me be very clear, I can see the complexities. And I also wonder what happened to my grandfather, because I don't think I don't think we came here harming people. So where did we learn the harm? And I'm not talking about where did we learn the harm from the white man or anything. I'm just saying, where did we learn it and where was it not addressed? And how do we do it in a way that we don't spend all day on him, that we, you know, disregard me or whatever, because sometimes that can happen as well, because then we can, again, I'm sure, given knowing his history and what he went through with Jim Crow South and white supremacy, we can again kind of stay on that. But then what is it that, given that little Aisha, didn't cause him the harm, why was I the recipient of the harm?
Exactly.
And so, and I feel like love with accountability and, you know, creates kind of an opportunity to begin to tease that apart. And again, it's hard work, because it isn't an easy answer. It isn't an easy answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just also want to say, not sexual harm. I want to be really clear about that. I have a brother who is exactly 9 years younger than me. Like, we were born on the same day. We're same father, different mother. So share same paternal family. And as a child, I think because I was being harmed, like I took it out on him in terms of not being as loving and caring as a big sister could be. Like, it was just like, there's a saying that Alice Walker, and I'm paraphrasing, it's like the man beats the woman beats the child beats the dog. It's like how, you know, that person who is less powerful than us, and we take it out on. And I share it because it was in 2015. So he was born in 78. We're talking about a long time. 2015, when initially my parents were not dealing at all with my cry and plea and demand for love with accountability, I was like, where in my life do I need to be accountable? And it was my brother, because I realized, oh my God, look at the harm and how it played itself out. I mean, it wasn't all bad. Nothing ever is, but just really needing to circle back and be accountable to him. And then that work really created space for us to do work with the young people in our lives that I'm not sure, had I not been accountable to him, would he have reached out to me for support in response to, you know, violence happening with the next generation. So just that kind of reaching back, and how it's like it then propels and helps the future generation. So that work, and I'm not a parent and I won't be one, but I know that pain of making the decision to be like, oh, I caused harm, because of course I want to stay all day on like, well, I've been harmed, but it's like, yeah, that's true. But you caused harm, and I want to repair and do this work, and also do it in a way that didn't demand that. I mean, because I said, you don't have to accept my apology. You don't have to engage. I just am putting it out there. So I didn't make it like, you have to do this, just to kind of, I opened the door and you know, just said, can I come in? And he did give me permission to come in, but also just like, if nothing else, that I at least took the steps to make amends.
Wow.
Yeah.
That makes me
think, and it makes me think, Ade, about the courages that it takes to do this dance, these dances with difficulty, as we said in season 1. You know, you also striking me too, Aisha, you know, what are we trying to begat? You know, that old thing about such and such begat so-and-so, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
You know, to me, I call this grown folks work. You know, I really do. When I was trying to find language for happiness in the Black Man of Happiness book, I said, you know, I'm looking for languages that capture what I really want to, 1, do and have govern my actions, and 3 or 4, you know, what languages do I want to capture where I want to be at? You know what I mean? Like my sister said, about where I want to be at behind that preposition. And I want to be at, and I want to say that for me, so often, and I've worked on campuses, you know, high performance campuses, and, you know, been a teacher, you know, so much of the best of core African American culture, that's what has guided me. I don't want to be no educated fool, for example. So you know, just because a person got a PhD don't mean nothing to me. I've edited dissertations, you know what I mean, and made them communicate beyond jargon, you know. And I think what Love with Accountability does, it just insinuates itself into right action. You know what I mean? It insinuates, you know, it says, it's like Tony, and you know, it's like, can you imagine, you know, I didn't know Tony as well as I think you think I did, but I knew her well enough, but I could just see her just, you know, actually my friend Nikki Finney really, really knew her quite well. Nikki and I have gone back to our 20s, but I could see her standing, or it's, you know, that core gestural position where you just look at a mug and you ain't got to say nothing. That's what Love with Accountability. It's just a marvelous like 5-dimensional concept, you know, from that allows itself to just on you. And the next thing you know, if you're serious, you do have to be accountable.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me even think now, you know, when Aisha, you mentioned your brother, I started thinking just about like, because I'm the youngest in my family. So it's like, I didn't necessarily have anyone that I took things out of, at least not to my own conscious awareness. Right. But with you asking your own question, you asking yourself, like, who do I need to be accountable for? It now makes me like in this exact moment, like, well, who do I need to be accountable for? You know, what, you know, and not saying that there has to be, but if there is, it's like I now want to go and explore and uncover that, because I also want to make sure that I'm living an accountable life. And, you know, I have memories of making sure that even in school, you know, especially high school and college, particularly when I was going through and being abused, I actually think I went the opposite, because I wanted to make sure, number one, I was trying to keep a secret. You know, I'm still was working in that space of like keeping a secret, keeping it to myself, thinking I could quote unquote handle it, right? Like I got this. But I lived in a space of making sure that everyone that was around me like liked me, like didn't have an inkling that something was wrong. I was the overprotector of a lot of my friends, a lot of my, you know, I became a mother figure. And I think that has some things that I am still working through. But just hearing you talk about the other layer of Love with Accountability now has me digging into a space of, what are some layers I need to be digging into? And of course, like we've all been talking about, the work is in that consciousness. The work is in that ability to be able to look at yourself and look at your surroundings and how you're navigating this world. And Pops, you said it, like to integrate everything to be a whole human being, even the ugliness, even the things that you've done that could have harmed someone else, pulling those things into your actual being and being accountable to yourself and to that person, if it is allowed, if it is warranted, like if they even want to receive it. So, you know, again, getting gems and getting, you know, more knowledge, and that's the beauty of this work. I believe that's the beauty of Love with Accountability. That's the beauty of, like we mentioned, like you said, Dad, the courage is, it doesn't just take courage to do something different. there are so many different layers and different forms of courage and how it shows up in your everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that's, again, dancing with difficulty. Like, these are the themes that we as PopsnAde talk about. These are the themes that we really are grasping with. And it's not just talk. These are actions that we are a part of. These are actions that we live by and are working towards making sure that other people can understand them and live by as well. And so, yeah, it's a consistent thing. It's a consistent thing. Absolutely.
Right. And it's also about with ourselves, right? Like all the ways in which we like the hearing you speak, Adenike, around, you know, your coping mechanisms. They resonated with me, and then I have my own. And then recognizing as a fully grown woman, the ways in which sometimes I'm not even aware of how I'm triggered and then react, like in terms of, and see that a lot in very safe spaces, like with my partner. So always I'm like, oh, okay, I see what's going on here. This is my stuff that I'm projecting, or, you know, it's so much. That's why I said it's just layers upon layers. And I think it's so important in terms of when we talk about all forms of harm, but specifically childhood sexual abuse, because it's those formative years, and you know, when our you know, our brains are forming, everything, and brains are forming, our emotions are forming, and so these imprints are left, and so having to peel back those layers, and really do that healing work. In the words of Communiqué Bombard, you sure you want to be well. Because you know, wholeness is no trifling matter. It's so it's serious.
Ooh, you gave me the chill that time. Wholeness is no trifling matter.
Yeah.
That is extraordinary to me. Hey, how we doing with our time, sis? I know we conversating and we get a roll on.
We in a good time. You know, I got y'all. I'm not going to let us go too much.
Between your old rant and pops, you know. You know, something too.
I did want to say,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you jump in.
I just wanted to say one thing that's really also important is, and you know, I is this notion around harm being on a spectrum, meaning, you know, we've got very extreme forms of harm, from like just minute, like gossiping or talking about somebody behind their back, to rape, murder, child, you know, those forms. But I think that part of that, I think for me, when I think about love with accountability, is recognizing that we are all capable of causing harm. We all cause harm. Now, like I said, all harm is not the same, that there's a spectrum. But I think that when we see that, then we can see the humanity. That doesn't mean we want them up close to us, to the harm doers who cause the most egregious forms of harm. Just seeing their humanity, recognizing that they need help. I'm not excusing it, but I just think that there's something about, again, thinking about the whole planet, the whole human species, and just recognizing that throughout our lives, we are going to cause harm. That's why I talked about my relationship with my brother. I'm sure friends I've caused harm, you know, and just because I think that when we can see that, then I think that just creates space and moves beyond this just kind of damnation, you know, all that, in terms of really creating spaces. I mean, for me, it's not my work per se. Like, I don't necessarily want to work with harm doers. Like, that's not my work. My work is working with the immediate survivors. But I do believe, and have, you know, there's some contributors in the anthology who write about it, that is work that must happen if we're going to change this society. And I think that also too is a part of love with accountability.
Yes. I really appreciate that. I call these things all in all. Remember that old Earth, Wind and Fire album? It's called All in All. But I have loved that turn of phrase because it just keeps me thinking, and it keeps me humble, because you know how little you know when you realize how much you don't know, when you just realize that this fullness of one life. You know what I mean? I just turned 66. And I tell my daughter, I tell my son, I have never felt more energized. I mean, you know, physically I have, but, you know, in terms of my ability to be engaged with this work, this cultural work, this creative work, this imaginative work, you know, I'm excited about life, which for me is visceral. And it's like food to me. And I love this concept that even in a difficulty, if I have an all in all perspective, then I celebrate the challenge of having candid conversations. Now, if I feel somebody trying to be a predator on me, you know what I mean? And again, as you said, Aishah, you know, you can be predatory without literally sneaking up and shanking a mug or otherwise snatching their body's safety and blah, blah, blah. So, but if you notice a person is all of a sudden shifting, they're not really in the dialogue with you. They're not really listening to you.
Yeah.
They just sort of waiting to jump in and smack you around a little bit more. I've had conversations like that. You know, somebody say, well, you know, in candor, I'd like to blah, blah, blah. But really, they just really want to pontificate. And then you're supposed to bow down and say, oh, okay, my bad. I realize what you're saying. Okay, dap, you know, you the person. And I'm like, oh, well, no. Or even when I used to tell Katama, my son and my daughter, I say, you know, we have had difficulties in our lives. I said, but remember, I was a grown-up. Y'all was children. So you felt your stuff through. I'm not talking about this harm, you know, that we're talking, this abuse that this criminal ex-stepfather brought into the world with us. I'm just talking about, you know, change, you know, divorce, all that stuff is difficult in and of itself. And I said, but now you get to say whatever you want to say. You get to everything from complain to critique, to blame, to say, Dad, you suck. Dad, you was this. Dad, you ain't do that, blah, blah, blah. But you don't, like in the movies, get to walk off the scene. You got to stay. And then I get to tell you, totally different perspective, 20 some years older than you, dealing with moms. I get to say, well, here's what was happening to me as an adult. Here's motivations for my decisions. Not defensive, nothing. Just saying, all in all, everything is valuable. But now that we are adults, what do we sift out of the experience? What good lessons do we take away? What humilities do we bring to the table as we now know? You know what I mean? And I tell you something y'all made me think about as we were doing this. You know, a lot of times people talk about how difficult it is to have these kind of conversations or to talk about these themes as if silence makes it easier.
Right.
And the deep irony for me, Aishah and Ada, is the more you talk through this stuff, the stronger your muscle gets to talk about this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The more you participate fully through the discomfort, within the discomfort, the difficulty, the better you get at weighing and analyzing. And, you know, the less kind of personal it gets almost, so that you can actually, you know, expand into accountability so that you can say, you know what, I think I'm getting something out of this now. Yeah. I'm not just settling into the blame game. I'm not just settling into the victory. I gotta win this one. You know what I mean? To me, that's what Love with Accountability continues to give. It's a wonderful gift from my perspective, Aishah. I just think it's a part of, it is absolutely part of the lexicon of healing.
Thank you.
I really, really mean that. I really, really mean that.
Thank you. And it's powerful because what this initially started as my personal thing. This was me on my meditation cushion, on my journey, trying to just like find some kind of equanimity or equilibrium in the chaos of just like my realizing, oh my God, my parents' role in this, right? Like it just kind of wanting them to deal with it and thinking and believing and knowing, wanting that they could deal with it based on their understanding around human rights violations around the world. And at that time, again, not a parent, they couldn't face it. So there I was, like, I got to find something so that I don't implode, you know, because I want to be well. And then what came was Love with Accountability. So it wasn't even like, let me come up with something that I can then bring other people in. And then was invited to apply for this fellowship for childhood sexual abuse survivors. And I started thinking, well, what is the project that I would want them to fund? And then I was like, oh, I love with the accountability. So it was like through my own personal experiences, my journey, that then it was just like then taking it outward.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But that's the beauty of the healing work. And like Dad said, creating another lexicon, creating another tool came from your need. And that to me is how real healing and real work that's rooted in actual transformation is founded. Because when it's just, when people are coming at, healing from a surface level of just trying to find solutions, but yet they have no personal connection to what they're trying to create, it typically doesn't resonate with people. It doesn't heal anyone. It's just a checklist. It's just like, oh, this is what it is. Yeah. Whereas when it comes from a deep-seated need of personal connection, it's stronger, it's more powerful. And then as you are a testament to how it just evolves, and you used this word before, reverberates into other people's lives, but also now into the work. You have created a movement from your own need to heal. And that is, that's how true healing actually works, because it comes from you. It comes from what's needed. I think that's what, that's how Dad and I got to where we are right now. It came from me. Like, I'm not going to live in the pain anymore.
Yes.
And what I also don't want, for me, a lot of my disclosure was about making sure this ended with me and my family. And, I can't guarantee that, you know what I'm saying? But I knew having a voice in this fight, literally, like I'm in this, I'm going to be an advocate for change and healing and growth, because if anyone is in my orbit, they at least know that there's something safe with me, because I'm going to be an advocate. So I'm working on always making sure that curses are broken and patterns are broken, and abuse that is around me is not happening. But if it does, I know that I'm also being a walking, living testimony of like, well, come to me and let's figure this out together, and holding space and being open and welcoming to have these difficult conversations when and if someone feels like they didn't have it before. Yeah.
Yeah, strength on strength, integrity on integrity. This kind of work leads to what I like to call ecstatic insights. To me, you were in ecstasy, in that meditative state. But it wasn't some generic ecstasy. It wasn't about pleasure per se. It was about the ecstatic contact with the dimensions of your pain, the huge questions you had of your mom and your pops. And you also, again, forgive me, you correct me if I'm wrong, but this is my inference from this. So, because you was so in it, you was like saying, let's all take the blame. You know what I mean? The only blameless person was you in your situation. The only blameless person in Ali's situation was hers. Because I know I had contributed to some of that distance, some of that silence, some of the anger, some of the debates and name calling with her mom that, as I like to say, created just that synapse gap. So that even when we were together, and we were together every summer, and then when I moved back in the 80s, was back east for 4 years, and I'd get them anytime they wanted. They'd call me up, come on, Dad, or I'd have them in the summer. But I'd say, what's going on in the crib? Who is this person? Has he said, done anything that's untoward? But just that little gap that couldn't quite leap to say, Dad, this is what is happening, or this is, what does this mean? Or this, that, and the other. And again, you can't adjudicate the past. I mean, you can you can do it, you can live it. You just kind of sift on out the best from back in the day. But for now, what I love about what you're doing, and I truly know that you've grown. This is what moves me. I truly know that you are grown. And to me, and in the core culture, for me, there's no higher praise than say, you're a grown ass woman to me. There's no higher praise because you went into everything. You know, there's a wonderful scholar out at Pomona College. Her name is Valerie Thomas. She has this marvelous work she's doing around vertigo, where she says you dive into the vertigo, and out of that dive, you get this genius of the ability to survive, the ability to survive with grace, the ability to survive with imagination and art forms and all of that stuff. You know, I always give her that. That's an amazing. I hope she gets her book out soon, if it's not out by now. But what you did, in my opinion, was grown folks' virtuosity. You dove into it, and you didn't let nobody off the hook. But yet you said, "But I love everybody. You're my mom. You're my dad. I honor your weaknesses, even. But we're family." And right about now, Ma, right about now, Pops, everybody needs to step up, because I was harmed, and we need to make sure that the harm is not just sort of like indiscriminately running through the universe now. We got to contain it. So that's, to me, also what Love with Accountability. That's a gift to you from the all. That's a gift to you from your all in all framework. Amazing. It's stay amazing to me. It's stay amazing.
Yeah. Well, on that note,
I
feel like that was the closure.
Yes. And can I just, if people want to know, I just wanted to share that my documentary, No, the rape documentary. So it's NO, the rape documentary, is available for streaming for $1 on Vimeo on demand. If you go to knowtherapedocumentary.org, the information is there. So, and then of course, Love with Accountability. You can read PopsnAde and all of our contributors. So it is available for purchase wherever books are sold. And I just really thank you all for the opportunity to conversate. I feel so honored to conversate, and also just to collaborate, partner with you. It's just been a gift. It's been
Onwards,
a gift.
baby.
Yeah. Same here. It's an honor. It's an honor to collaborate with you, to know you, and we'll make sure that everybody has all of the information when we upload and share. So thank you so much, Aishah. And Love with Accountability.
Yes.
If you don't know, now you know.
Now you know.
Right. Love with Accountability.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, everyone. Aishah.
Peace.
All right. Thank you.
You've been listening to Conversating with PopsnAde. We're your hosts, Peter Harris.
And I'm Adenike Harris. Please, wherever you're listening to this podcast, subscribe, share with your friends, and give us feedback. Also, don't forget to follow us at our Instagram page at PopsnAde, PopsnAde. Facebook, we are Peter and Adenike Harris. And you can also find us on YouTube, where you can see other videos of work that we have done, including our TED Talk entitled Healing versus Retaliation. Thanks again, and come back soon.